Good morning, everyone. Hope you are having a good SUGCON. You're all charged up for the day too. Yes? Okay. Yeah. Thanks for taking your time to attend our session. We will talk about how we unified 4 CMS platforms for a big CPG client to a one platform, which is SitecoreAI. We'll talk about that journey, how we transform their platforms into one. Yeah. Before we talk about the details, let's do a quick introduction. Myself, Kiran Patil. I'm working as a group technology director at Horizontal North America. I have been a 14-time Sitecore Technology MVP. I've been working in the industry for 19 years. Out of that, 17 plus years working on Sitecore. So started on Sitecore 6.3, then also a proud father of two daughters.
Hello, I am Sophia Lee. I am a senior solution architect at Horizontal Digital, North America as well. Been basically doing full stack development for 15 years. So, this is my second time architecting a large CPG multi-brand client. I am also I don't know if any of you are familiar or have used the XD browser, the Experience Edge browser, but I created that, and I am a fan of karaoke. If anyone is planning on doing that tonight, I be interested in joining.
Awesome.
Back to Karen.
So yeah, let's talk about the context because contexts are important for AI as well as humans. Let's talk about what problem was in front of us. So there are two views in front of you. The left side view, which is a before view. So this is a big CPG brand. They had 200 websites on various platforms. Uh, Again, you can see a Sitecore. Even they had three Sitecore instances, separate instances, and then they had Salesforce Experience Cloud. They had Optimizely, WordPress. Even in WordPress, they had a self-hosted WordPress, WordPress headless, and then all the integrations, all the components, they kind of duplicate across all the platforms. And then you can just think of a chaos that creates because if you have to update one integration, you have to update on all the platforms. And then same, like if you have to update some component, you have to update at 4 places. And then the journey where you can see the right side where we have migrated them to a Sitecore AI, where they have unified platform with all the brands sitting in the one single platform with a single code base. And in this session, we'll talk about how we did the whole journey from where they were to where they are now. So let's look at the problems we had to solve. Just more details around the challenges what were in front of us. Uh, so as I mentioned, like they had 4 CMS platforms in the Sitecore. They are in Sitecore XP, 3 separate instances. So basically, they're paying the cost for hosting, developing, and again, development teams are also different. So there was kind of no reusability on site code. They had Optimizely Pass, and then Salesforce Experience Cloud and WordPress. They had 300 plus components across these platforms. There were, again, as you can see, there is no reusability across those components. And then 20 plus integration points across the platforms. Same, no reusability there. And then the 4x the cost because each feature they have to implement 4 times across the different platforms. Just a more drilled down version of this fragmented CMS landscape, what they were on. They had Sitecore XP 10.x, Sitecore XP 9.3, and again a Sitecore XP 9.3 with a different brand. Few had a Covio search, few had Elasticsearch, few had some custom search, few had no search, and then there are few using some content hub DAM, few using Optimizely DAM, few using no DAM, like file system based hosting they are using. And then again, as I mentioned, components integrations are duplicate across all these platforms. That's the architecture, and they had 4 separate vendors to implement this, and again, internal teams to maintain this, which is a complicated thing to maintain, and again, to have a cost as well associated with that. And from there, this is where they are right now. We are moving them to Sitecore AI, where you can see a unified headless architecture, uh, where the bottom layer, what you see, is managed by client. They are managing all the services what they have in house for their internal operations and the business logic. And then we build a global component library on Sitecore AI powered by Vercel, where we have a global components but at the same time, it's a big CPG brand. Again, due to compliance reasons, I cannot name the brand, but it's a big brand. So few of the brands have their own specific features, which you cannot generalize. So we also built up functionality where they can have their specific features which the brand wants. So it's a global architecture. At the same time, gives the flexibility to the brand for what they need. And then on top of it, we build those Sitecore AI is a multi-site and multilingual. So we have multi-site, multilingual capabilities where we build those brands on top of it. Along with that, we need to make sure that it's scalable. So we have a CDN and WAF capabilities, and we also make sure that all the critical functionalities or critical operations things are getting logged into the system. So yeah, you can see like how complicated the system is. We could not start the development unless we do an in-depth discovery, which I think we always recommend. So how we did a discovery, that's what Sophia will talk about it.
Yep. So first we need to figure out what are we working with, right? Um, so a big part of this was working collaboratively with the client because obviously they have to walk us through what systems they have. There's only so much you can glean from looking at the code, and um, luckily we had contacts with a client that had a wealth of like long-term knowledge that have been there 10 plus years that know the systems in and out and were able to really help us dive into that, and that was critical for this analysis. And then we also did the component inventory, and we looked at it from two lenses. First, our UX designers would look at it from the lens of like, what are these components just from like a UI perspective, right? Where are there similarities? Where are there places we can consolidate? At the same time, we're also looking at the back end of it, because just because two components look similar on the front end, how they retrieve the data can be drastically different, and also vice versa. There can be the same data can be displayed in multiple different ways, so there isn't always a one-to-one correlation, and we had to take that holistic picture from the design perspective, from the backend perspective, take that, consolidate it, and combine it. And then the third aspect is the services layer, which um, again, our client is, uh, despite on the CMS side, there is a lot of duplication. In terms of the business logic, they've been very good about consolidating into common services. And as part of this project, they kind of further consolidated that. So all the core business logic lives outside of the CMS, outside of the head application, and they are in API-driven services. Um, so kind of as we did our inventory, we found, as Kiran mentioned, 300 plus components, multiple variants of the same component, some with little differences, some with big differences, and most of them were duplicative. And then also each CMS, despite it, as I mentioned earlier, they do have a lot of core services that are shared, but they also, just by the nature of growing over time, they did have things that were disparate and separate. So part of this effort was on the client side to take all of those and do that consolidation while we kind of do the consolidation on the CMS side. So it really was a team effort working closely with the client in a collaborative way. So next, talk about the architecture vision. Um, so the current state, there's lots of again lots of duplication, and the goal is to really bring it together into one unified architecture. Um, and that's going to be on Sitecore AI, Next.js for Cell. And the goal is to have one code base that is shared across all of these different brands. Um, one of the key things that actually makes this all possible is actually at the design level to have a single design system in Figma, um, using Figma design tokens, and we take those tokens directly from Figma, sync them via API, so those tokens translate one-to-one to CSS variables. And I'll show you later in the demo in Figma how you can swap between brands, and that will swap between the variables. We replicated that functionality on the front end side so that now we have a one-to-one correlation between Figma and the code. And so anything the designers can do, we can also do, and it kind of gives us that sync. And again, I'll show you that in the hopefully live demo later. Um, and then just kind of the overall architecture, right? This is mostly pretty standard stuff. We have our DevOps, we have our Dev QA prod environment, our hosting environments in Vercel. Then we have the services layer that's created and hosted by our client, and then obviously the end users of the site. So now we have all this information. How do we start building on that foundation? Really, the kind of you start out the way you start any project is you kind of take a holistic picture. What are the core shared data templates that you need? What are your global data sources? How do we ensure that these are flexible so that they can handle big brands, they can handle small brands, and a lot of this is kind of very strong collaboration again between design and development. We kind of go back and forth to make sure all of this is flexible and scalable. And then obviously having our CI/CD pipelines for continuous integration. The nice thing with Vercel is you create a PR, it can automatically create a preview branch, preview deployment for you. So we can use that to review the code, and in some cases, we will send that to the design. If there's something that we have a question on, we might send the link to our designer to say, hey, can you check this to make sure this is what you expect and this behavior is as expected. And we can do that from a PR branch before the code gets merged. So that's a really powerful aspect of working with Vercel. And then, of course, as mentioned earlier, really the services is really the backbone of what makes up what makes all of this work at an enterprise scale, because we can scale the UI side, but we also need to make sure that all the business logic remains intact, because they have their PIM system, and these are shared across. They have actually multiple different. Mostly, they're trying to consolidate, but there's still some different systems behind the scenes. But that's abstracted away in a service layer, so that from our application code side, we don't actually need to know how they source that. We just need to know that we call this service layer, and we get the data. And so they've kind of done our client has done a really good job of ensuring that all flows together really nicely. And then just some practical day-to-day development. What we have started to do is, instead of having developers backend developers each spin up their own local Docker instances, we actually work out of a shared dev environment. So the dev environment is kind of like our shared local environment. There are pros and cons to that approach, but in our experience, the pros outweigh the cons, and the main thing is just faster time to develop. Because when we were working with local Docker, what we would have is the Sitecore developer would create all the data templates, sync those, create a PR, get those merged, and then the front end developer, after that PR is merged, can then start working with that data. If there needs to be a change, again, that needs to go through that whole cycle. I need to add a field. Okay, well, that's a whole PR cycle before we can get access to that field by having the shared dev environment. They have access, the front end developer has access to that right away. It has just a lot smoother workflow. One of the downsides is when you're syncing your Sitecore templates, you will get work in progress from other developers. And to alleviate that, we, instead of having just like our shared module, like module JSON serialization files, each feature and each component really had their own, and that allows the developer to just pull down the things that they're working with. They don't have to pull down everyone else's work in progress. It's not a perfect system, but it helps alleviate that. Um, then finally, we are also using Leprechaun to do TypeScript interface generation, and really that helps make sure basically prevent typos, make sure that field names are correct. You get IntelliSense for those field names, and if someone renames a field in Sitecore and you pull it down, you get a error that you know you need to go fix instead of things mysteriously breaking. And then back to Kiran.
Awesome. Yeah. So another key aspect of this migration was design system, because as we discussed, there are 200 brands sitting on the same instance. Each brand has their own style guide. They have their own colors, themes, spacing. Even the hero banner, hero component for each brand is different shape and form. So we use a design system to make this happen, and also consolidate the components. In case you are new to design system, basically you build those kind of components and required variables. You also call it design tokens in a Figma terminology. You define those by brand, and then when you create a page templates, you apply those design tokens by brand, and then the final output is each brand have their own kind of shape and form of components, but technically they are the same components. It adopts the brand guidelines when you transform those. So that's what we did. We did as part of this design system design. As you can think of, like 200 brands, they have roughly 45 components, and then each component has like different colors, spacing, radius. Think of it as a developer. If you have to merge that manually, you'll not be going home. You'll be just doing that and spending your time on that. So to simplify that and make it more developer friendly and avoid all the human errors, what we did, we built a module where we use a Figma REST API, because we are using Figma for design system. We read a Figma tokens using a REST API and created a module which converts that to required CSS files. So let's say the workflow is designer, once they are done with the brand update, they will notify developer that, hey, this update is done. So developer, they will just run a Figma sync, which will take all the tokens for that brand and sync into a local developer environment. They still are going to verify in local, but it is kind of a simplified process. And then once they are happy with all the validations, they will just commit the change, and the change is live. So think of this process saving a lot of time. And then the final output is you have multiple brands adopting the brand guidelines just by a single command. The other aspect of this is component consolidation. As we discussed earlier, there are 300 plus components. So we uh, used some of the knowledge we had of the client's ecosystem. We also talked to the lot of brand owners, and then also had a governance process where we could simplify those 300 plus components into 45, roughly 45 reusable components with some variants supported. And then this all has been possible using design system. And again, at the same time, governance and brand guidelines, because each brand owner will say that I need this component, but the governance body will say that no, we have these components and we have to make things possible using that. And the client has been very good in managing that from that aspect. Yeah. Next slide. So yeah, this is again, we have talked about the key pillars. Now, how we executed it, because execution is important. You can think about the great architecture, great ideas, but execution is the key, especially for such a big brand. So we'll talk about how we executed it. Uh, the first thing is we use the co-development model, because as I mentioned, client team also had a lot of developers working on their side. It was a good combination. Like there are few Sitecore developers who know Sitecore backend very well, but don't know the headless architecture, like Next.js and all those things. And there are a few WordPress developers who know headless very well, but don't know Sitecore very well. So we create some kind of a pod structure and also a training plan where we train the Sitecore developers on Next.js and headless architecture like JSS. And then for the WordPress guys, we also train them on the Sitecore backend data modeling. At the same time, we also created a kind of mentoring program. Like we paired one Sitecore backend developer with a WordPress developer, and I feel like we also were there. So that worked out very well. So that's a key part of co-development model. Uh, the reason of doing that onboarding because client wanted to maintain this platform when we are done with the implementation. At the same time, we wanted to scale super fast, and we cannot scale with a small team. We need to make sure that we have a bigger team. So the foundation, we had a one team, but once the foundation was built, we created multiple pods where each pod is owning a brand and they are delivering that brand. So that's how we could scale this and speed up this overall environment. And one of the biggest learning was continuous feedback because again we learn every day and then we change the process because it was not perfect from day one, but we evolve the process as we learn in each sprint. And the last thing, and not the least, strong governance is very important. Again, I cannot re-emphasize this one because each brand will say that I need component, I need this feature, and that feature. But the governance body was very supportive, where they make sure that all the brands onboard to this new unified architecture. Then one of the another biggest piece was content migration because 200 sites on a single platform, on a different platform, we need to make sure that we plan some content migration efforts because the client's goal was to do a slight modification on the content, but wanted to lift and shift the content as much as possible. Think of the old legacy templates, legacy components to a new modern templates, modern components. It was a complicated thing, but we tried to automate it as much as possible. The learning there was we created a transformation logic at each of the source system where we transform the source system's output to a JSON format. So it's a one standard format. And then we built an import script in a Sitecore AI, which basically reads that JSON file and creates those new components as per the new component and new data model what we had. So that's the biggest learning on this one. And then we are trying to use Pathway, but it was again not available at the point of time. But I would strongly recommend exploring Pathway when you guys are exploring this kind of an content migration. And we also build some validation in QA framework to make it a robust process. Yeah, and then the once you have the content migration, we have the component done, design system done. Now let's talk about the rollout strategy. And the biggest learning is staggered rollout. You cannot just launch all the 200 brands. Do it slowly. Start with a pilot. I think we did a first pilot, the first brand one launching. We learned a lot of things there. And then we applied those onto brand two. And then we optimized the process. And then by brand four, I think the process is mainly rinse and repeat. And we standardize the process. So I would strongly recommend that you should have a staggered release plan, and then it will not be smooth in the brand one, but by brand four, you will be standardizing the process. Yeah, so I think by this time we have seen a lot of talk and a lot of things, but now let's see how it works together. And as I mentioned, it was a CPG brand. We cannot name it or demonstrate it. So what we did for demo, we built a fictional CPG brands for demo, and Sophia will showcase how it will work together. What is Sophia?
Yep. I'll bring the slide up so you can get the QR codes later if you want them. Um, but now, mm, um, yep. So just first going to show the three different demo sites that we created all within the same design system. So this is peak energy bars. You see it kind of as a um, dark theme with kind of a lot of green on black. And then we have bright pressed juices. That is kind of more of a light theme. And then we have Sprout and Spoon cereals, has kind of a more pastel color. And then also it's more clear, but also we also vary things like spacing, border radius. So in this for this brand, you see that the hero is more rounded. And then in our Next.js code, we have we have a Figma file key, which is really just it's really this part of the URL of Figma, and then also have a API key to sync it down, and so we can we're going to look at this feature component here, and one thing that can see is just kind of wanted to show how this works is, let's see. So we can take this, so in Figma, we can take this one component, we can view this through in different brands, and then also each brand we have up to 5 different, oops, yeah. So we have 5 different themes within each brand, so that kind of gives flexibility so that the and not every component is necessarily theme enabled, but for the components that do have multiple theme variations, this kind of lets us give more flexibility for the content, so it doesn't all look the same. And so we can kind of see that we have these for each of the for each of the different brands, and then those also translate directly to CSS variables. So what that looks like is um, we have our CSS variables, and these map one to one to um, these Figma tokens here that I will bring back up. I'll maximize this so you can see we have lots of different variables. We have a brand collection that has each of our brands, and then we also have theme collection. So there's an entire system, and um, this is this is one of the really cool things that our design team has been able to put together, and we've worked closely with them to uh, be able to leverage this. Um, so what I'm gonna look at right now is um, this light theme, on background. If I change this here, I don't know if you saw uh, that changed that color there. Um, and then we also have the site running on my local host. Another thing we added, and this we have this toggled on via environment variable, but you can take so you can see the exact same content is being themed in different ways, and then we can also choose the different themes for within each component. So the component level theming, that we have that as a rendering parameter, so that the content author and page builder can choose what theme they want. This is really for developers, but it's also useful for just kind of a quick validation QA where you can check, hey, does this all match up? Does this all look good, without having to um, create all the different pages with all these different variants. You can create one page and then see that component across all the different brands and themes. Um, so so change this back to default. And then one thing I wanted to show here then is, so right now we're on bright press. If I change this color here to this light blue, I can come here to my command line. I will run the command to do the Figma token sync. And so this will take about 30 seconds or so, not too long. So that downloaded all the, so there's a couple different parts. First is it downloads the tokens as kind of raw JSON. So this is the format that we get from the Figma REST API. So it's quite verbose, and then we take that and we translate that to CSS variables. And if we kind of look at the diff, we can see this change from BG Lite to BG Brand 2. And then we can see that the corresponding CSS variable has also changed. And then if we come back to our website here, we can see that this is now that same light blue after running that sync command. Another thing we actually added that was because one of the problems that we ran into pretty early on is that when designers would rename variables, right, that would kind of cause a problem in the code. And since that was a bit of a pain point, one of the things we did is, I will show this in a minute, BG test. And also, depending on how big your team is. So if you modify the Figma directly, these do get updated in real time. But in Figma, you can also create branches and merge them same as you do code. So if you have a large design team, your designers may want to work in branches within Figma so that we can kind of get those consolidated updates. But right now, we're kind of doing it more real time. So I will just run this command again. Yep, and kind of also as you see here, the changes we do check in the CSS, and the main reason for that is we have the developer in the loop to validate the changes. We don't just have the designer making the update and then it goes straight live. Designer makes the update, the developer has to make a conscious effort to pull down those updates. They will validate and check those updates, make sure everything looks good. And then if everything looks good, then they create a PR, check that in. So there is developer intervention, but they are not manually going in and updating the values. They are just running a command and then validating. Okay, so and we kind of saw that we renamed that variable to BG test, and here, so what one of the things we added to the script is this concept of a diff file, and this diff file just has the internal Figma variable ID, which you can't actually see. I don't know if there's a way to see it in Figma, but when you pull it via API, each variable is tied to an ID, and when they're renamed, they maintain that ID. So basically, the diff file is the previous value of the ID to the token name, and then if that changes, we can compare the previous to the new, and then we just do a text search through the code base to find. It's basically a glorified string replace, and that gets us 99% of the way there. We still want a developer to manually check that, hey, this is actually correct. And sometimes they'll have to go back to the designer and say, "Hey, was this intentional?" But it kind of keeps a developer in the loop so that we have that vetting process. Um, but yeah, I think that's uh, pretty much covers it. Here's that slide if anyone wanted to take a look at those demo sites.
Awesome. Thanks, Sophia, for the cool demo.
Yeah.
So, and it shows that it's real. Let's talk about the lessons we learned and key takeaways from this session. Because when you go back from this session, I want to make sure that you have the 10 top key learnings what we had. So we'll talk about those real quick in this session. Onto the
Yeah.
presentation mode.
Yeah. How do you know how to get to it without restarting from the beginning? This one.
Awesome. So let's talk about the lessons we learned and key takeaways. The first one is discovery takes longer than expected because you are talking to multiple teams and getting the alignment, understanding the systems. Few systems have been built by people who were working at the organization, but now no more at the organization. No one knows how the system works or where the code resides. So it takes a lot of time. So make sure that you plan that time into your discovery. uh, Component standardization is harder than technology because once you have the final consolidation of component, because 300 components to 45, roughly 85% reduction, that takes a lot of time. And obviously, there are multiple aspects of it. One is a developer aspect where you look at the components and variants and try to see how can you consolidate it. At the same time, from the CX point of view, because CX also makes sure that they provide their point of view on consolidating the components. So plan for it. But I feel like having a finalized component, standardized component makes the development easy. Design system unlocks the scalability. I think demo has shown us if we had to do it manually without design system, it'll be hard to maintain those brands. And think of a situation where brand has to change their guidelines. You have to do everything manually, but now with design system, you can update those in Figma, run a sync, and you are ready to launch the new brand run thing. Decoupling integration is a game changer. Integrations, again, this is not an headless architecture. This is an uh, old learnings what we had from those three-layer architecture. We always keep the business logic separate on a service layer. If you have that, this kind of integrations or migrations can be straightforward. Uh, Incremental rollout reduces risk significantly. Again, you cannot do all the brands cannot go together. You have to make sure that you roll out in a staggered manner. So you have learnings and you optimize the process as you go.
Yep. And then code development accelerates adoption, especially when you have a client that has a lot of developers. They want their developers involved. Um, in the beginning, it'll obviously slow things down because you need to ramp people up. But once the team gets trained up, then you have a lot of developers that are all familiar with the system and are able to move quickly and efficiently. Um, then next, also, as we talked about multiple times, governance is critical. You can't have every brand asking for every little feature. They all have to make sure that we think about not just does this make sense for this brand, but does this make sense for the system as a whole? Is this going to be generally useful for multiple brands? And sometimes there are cases where like a particular brand is of very high importance to the client and they get things that other brands don't, and that happens as well. But the important part is that there is thought put into it from a holistic perspective. Um, API first enables AI first. So um, as we kind of get as we're entering the and already are in the AI world, having a lot of these actions driven by APIs does helps enable building AI agents in the future. Then system migration is a product. It's not a one and done project, right? It's a continuous process. You're never truly done. You just keep building on top of it. And then lastly, plan for content migration. It's always going to take longer than you want. Even with AI support, it's not, you get into a scenario, hey, this looks almost right, but wait, when you really dig into it, there's all these issues. So plan for that time for content, and also like try to strike a balance between, does this make sense to automate, or is this better for manual? If it like, there are a lot of sometimes it's better to automate, sometimes it's just a bunch of one-off scenarios that you're better off having a content author manually review and make those updates. So that's always a judgment call and a balancing act of really thinking about what is the most efficient way and not just trying to do a one size fits all solution. Yep. And then unifying platforms is not just about reducing systems, it's about creating a foundation that enables speed, scale, and innovation. And thank you to all of our sponsors. I think we have a couple minutes for questions.
Two bits. First, got to Sherry. So you talked about the incremental rollout content. We did that up, and one of the things we struggle with was, though I know you said multiple systems, but then getting those users to work in two systems at the same time. So how do you deal with that and the sort of the pushback you get from that? What's the
Yeah. Do you want to repeat the question for the recording?
Yeah. And the question is, if I understand right, like how you handle the pushback coming from the users working in two different systems, and then yeah, how to handle that? Yeah, I think
Yep.
yeah, I want to.
Yeah. So kind of lucky for our client, because they are already working with a large system across, like a large enterprise across multiple systems. They're kind of already used to that. So in this particular case, we didn't run into that issue too much, and they were actually very cooperative and worked with us. But yes, in we have had clients where that is not the case, and it's one of the learnings from those is to talk about these things up front so that they're not surprised by it, because no one likes to think things are going to work one way and then you tell them, okay, actually you need to do this and this, right?
Yeah, just to add to that, like we involve those authors from discovery itself, and then when we are kind of building in the sprint, they were there for demos, and then they could start providing the feedback, and then the good thing is like majority authors were already in using Sitecore XP. They were using Experience Editor, but then when they seen the page builder, they were super happy with how things work. So I think that adoption was straightforward for us. Yeah, good question. Think we have more question. Yeah.
some of that? We're using Sitecore XP, so you have to forgive my ignorance. But it sounds like your services API is abstracting your data sources. If I'm correct on that, how would something like the Experience Editor work with using Greek Editor?
Do you want to
Yeah,
repeat the question?
yeah, I'll repeat the question. So good question. So the question is, if the services are decoupled, how it will work in the experience editor or a page builder in the new Sitecore AI, how that will work in a page builder mode? That's the
Yep.
question. Okay.
Yeah. And so just wanted to clarify that the services layer isn't really about the Sitecore data, because that's considered content. We are talking about talking to their internal databases. They have a PIM system that manages their products. So those things are managed by other teams, not the content team. And so those portions would not be editable in Page Builder, but they would obviously show up. But those are managed by different teams, and those are used not just for the website but also for other properties.
Last question. Me? Yeah. So it's the same area around content strategy. So I put a few things to ask you. So do you have multiple Lingo? Do you have to also migrate digital assets for down as part of that strategy? And also around content utilizations, because you designed a new system, it's not necessarily the old content kinetic key, but the size of one last change. How did you handle that?
So there are two questions. The first question is you had to migrate all the assets to DAM. That's the first question. And the second was like about, sorry, I forgot the second question.
Yeah, so the content optimization, let's say you design in SitecoreAI new templates. It's possible that maybe in the target system, the front end from the legacy does not fit. So you have kind of do some
Yeah.
so how do you handle that?
Yeah. So basically transformation of the content, like was you had a component A, now it's component B, and then the data template A, data template B. So yeah, I can take a first pass and then you can add to it. So the first one was DAM, like as part of the migration to keep things simple, we kept things as is. So there are a few systems where they're not using DAM, they're using Sitecore media library. So for those systems, we still using Sitecore media library. So Sitecore AI still supports media library, so we use that. Uh, and then there is a goal in the future where we move all the assets from all the systems to Sitecore AI. They also have content hub, and I feel like now with this unified Sitecore AI, where Sitecore media library won't exist, it will automatically move to content hub, so that will automatically happen. But we kept it simple in the phase one because we wanted to not complicate things for the DAM part. The second part was about transformation. So what transformation, what we did, we uh, we are doing that at a source system. So for example, for 3 Sitecore XP systems, we had to write some transformation logic where let's say template A maps to template B now. So that kind of mapping, the field mapping, everything was written at that level using PowerShell. And then we created a JSON file. In that, all the mapping was done based on the target system. So the benefit of that is when you import that JSON file to the target system, which is Sitecore AI, you don't need to write any transformation, all the transformation at the source level. So let's say if when we do that WordPress, right? Same thing they have to do for WordPress, but we get a final JSON file. You just import to Sitecore AI, and then your content migration is done.
Yep, and just to add to that, there were definitely complications where there were some cases where you actually had two components in the old system, but they mapped to one component in the new one, and also vice versa. So there's some combining, some splitting, and in some cases, like they had like this one like mega component that was super flexible. It can be a grid, it can be a carousel, it can have pagination, it can have facets, they can display as cards, they can display as labels, and in kind of our new system, we kind of had those as distinct, some of those as distinct components when we kind of thought about what makes the most sense for content authors. And that was a very tricky part of the migration. And honestly, the bulk of the time of the migration is just doing that analysis of how do all these components map. And also when we're doing the mapping, we don't just look at one component at a time. We also look at adjacent components and kind of map those patterns. So that it was actually that complexity that it's like, okay, this is actually a lot more complex than we initially thought it was, and as we did that analysis.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.